between the gut and the brain. Thanks a lot for the introduction. So this is a joint research between Neural Engineering and Translational Labs, Department of Psychiatry, where I'm affiliated to, and the Neural Interaction Lab from the Department of Bioengineering. So thanks to Gajendra, who spoke earlier today, setting a very nice introduction to the coupling between the brain and the gut and the significance of the same. So just to recap a little bit more on that, brain and the gut communicates bidirectionally, ascending, say, via some vagal, endocrine, and immune signal-based, and also to note is stomach generates intrinsic oscillatory electrical activity via the Cajal cells. And there are also significant descending control, mostly largely via parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And many areas in the brain seems to influence such a control. Notably, electrical interplay between the brain and the gut is poorly understood, and that's where my study is going to be on. So how do we do that? We can understand and measure the electrical activity from the brain and the gut in a non-invasive fashion. Gut by a technique called electrogastrography. This is done by placing electrodes, multiple of them, on the abdomen. And gut physiology is typically understood prominently in this frequency between 0.03 to 0.07 hertz. And one way to understand the brain is through MEG. That's where more contemporary studies work. That's what most contemporary studies work on the similar questions. So what do they do? I'm just going to share one major result from the parallel research group on this. They use MEG and they study the brain-gut coupling using MEG in the resting state. The significance of resting state is that's when your gut is more active and we have parasympathetic control. So they get the signals from the brain and the gut, and in the brain from the alpha band for its prominent, because of its prominence during the resting state. And then they measure something called phase amplitude coupling that tells us about how coupled these two signals are. And what they find is interesting. They find a gastric network in the brain. So just to say more specifically, in a little more detail, they find activations mostly in the parieto-occipital area and the right insular area, where they saw some significant activations representing the brain-gut coupling. With that introduction, I just wanted to now jump to what we are actually doing. So here in my study, what we're doing is we are measuring gut through EEG under the guidance of Professor Coleman from the Neural Interaction Lab. And in the brain, we measure something called EEG, electroencephalography. And this is with the guidance of Dr. Jyoti Mishra from the NEET Labs. So the significance of our research tool is that it's cheap, scalable, and it's easy for clinical translations. We again focus on alpha band for its prominent role in the resting paradigm and the cognitive paradigm as well, and the 0.03 to 0.07 hertz for the EEG. So just to quickly list down my aims and objectives. So we are going to understand the brain-gut coupling via the EEG and the EGG. And I'm going to look at two major factors. One is study this coupling in hunger versus satiety. And next, study it during rest and during cognitive engagement. This is how we are differentiating ourselves from the contemporary research. And we are doing this for the first. So just to elaborate more on the study design, a participant walks into the lab. It's a 2-visit study, and they could either be in a hunger state or a satiety state, and that's randomly controlled, the sequence. And in any of those contexts, they are administered cognitive tasks, and we also measure the EEG and EGG during the resting state. And some of the cognitive paradigms that we are testing them on includes working memory, interference processing, and emotional interference. So currently I'm going to share results with you for 8 healthy volunteers. And this is still an ongoing study, just got a bit slow because of COVID. But we got some very interesting results to share. And these are very standard cognitive testing paradigms for working memory, Planck's task, and emotional interference. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but happy to discuss later. So this is the way we are going to measure the phase amplitude coupling. I'm going to use a classic toolbox, EEG lab in MATLAB for doing this analysis, and just going to measure the phase for this phase amplitude coupling from the gut. It's a slow rhythm. It just operates in 0.03 to 0.07, as we have been saying from the beginning. And then for the brain, I'm going to focus on the alpha rhythm and compute the phase amplitude coupling and z-score it for the results that I'm going to share right now. So first is some control analysis results. So this is one contemporary result from the MEG group, and we did the same with EEG, and we are able to see in our pack the activations in the insular region of the brain and the parieto-occipital region of the brain. So that's good. Now moving quickly to results. So our first question of interest was, does this interplay change with hunger and satiety? And we see, yes, it seems to be changing, especially during hunger. We saw activations in the insular area, in the right inferior frontal area, and in the satiety, we saw it in the parieto-occipital area. We control for all this results using permutation, random permutation control. And these are all just 0.05 corrected for now in t-test, statistical test. And the difference, we found a significant difference between these two contexts in the parieto-occipital area. And the second question is, does this change on cognitive engagement while playing a cognitive game or while resting? Seems yes. And the difference seems to be largely felt during the resting state than overall, like in a general cognitive task. But if we delve deep into the cognitive paradigm, we see differential activations between the cognitive tasks as well. So it could be based on different cognitive engagement or demands that these circuits are really demanding in the participant's brain, but we are still working on the details of this to interpret it much better. So just to summarize, we are the first to do the EEG and EGG recording simultaneously, and do that while the participants are in hunger satiety contexts or states, and also take them into cognitive paradigms, testing them in cognitive paradigms, and also understanding it during rest. So it seems, at least from our current results, that the interplay is dependent on the hunger levels. And we do see areas in the insular area and the parieto-occipital area consistent with the parallel research group who does it with MEG. And we also find that the differential activations based on the task paradigms as well, which is interesting when we are still working on the interpretation. And in the we see the difference for hunger and satiety as well. So with that, I conclude, and I want to I want to really thank the Kavli Foundation for making this work possible, and invaluable guidance from Todd, Jyoti, and Dakshin, and helping me with the data acquisition, Julian and team during this COVID time. And then we have a master's thesis out of this work as well. So that's cool. And lots of clinicians, friends, discussions with them, and lots of interns who helped with the work as well. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
It was wonderful. Thank you. There's one question here. First question, what do muscles versus neurons contribute to the EGG?
So this one, that's a very great question. So the EGG that we are looking at is the 0.03 to 0.07 Hertz. That's suggested to be largely contributed by the ICC, the Cajal cells in lining the stomach that happens only during the movement of the stomach. I'm not sure about how much role the neurons play in this, other than the ICC cells.
Okay, next question is, what was the age and gender composition of the group that was studied?
So these were young, healthy adults between 18 to 40 age group, and gender composition, we tried our best to have equal proportion of the male and the female, and it's still an ongoing study. So with the age, we have 5 females and 3 males for the current results that I'm showing you.
Very good. The question I had was, do you have any thoughts on why insula and occipital cortex? I know it's a sort of a work in progress, right? But what's your thinking around why those areas of cortex specifically?
So the insular area is well studied for its link to the olfactory system and the gustatory system. And it seems reasonable that whenever we intake food and as a function of hunger or satiety, this area of the brain seems to be playing a role or encoding that. And all the paradigms that the contemporary research and most of the, at least the control analysis we did was on resting state. So during resting, that's when we control our visual input, and we either, at least the paradigm we did, we close our eyes and we just relax. So that's where the occipital cortex and the parieto-occipital area seems to be playing a very interesting role in that. So the rest and digest aspects of it.
And then one last sort of related question that was asked is, does the hypothalamus have a role in your model?
Definitely it would, but just that we are now, at least the measurements I'm using is EEG. It's just going to be cortical recordings, and I don't have the luxury to look in that level. And I'm just looking at the electrical interplay right now. So I could definitely see the role of hypothalamus, but it's just that I wouldn't have the luxury to interpret more on that with the results.
Great, well, thank you. I want to genuinely thank all the speakers for the session. I thought the talks were just spectacular, frankly, and